Hello, welcome to this video on 2 great ways to improve your brain health. My name is Claire McLean. I'm a physical therapist and I specialize in working with people who have Parkinson's disease. We have a monthly wellness workshop that meets, and our goal for this workshop is to cover topics that are things that people can do themselves to improve their health. So we bring research and different speakers for different topics. And the presentation we started with yesterday was thinking about some ways that we could improve our brain health this year. I'm not necessarily a big fan of resolutions at the beginning of the year for the New Year's, but I do really like the opportunity to think about the past year, think about the coming year, and what things I'm excited to do differently, and have kind of a reset at the beginning of the year. It's just a nice time to kind of refresh and think about maybe what your goals might be. So we met yesterday and we had a great meeting, lots of good discussion. And I have 2 ways to improve brain health that we talked about in a little bit more detail yesterday. I will split up these videos into 2, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is talking about activity monitors and exercise and activity, and part 2 is talking about Brain HQ, an online training program. So I split those up just so that you could watch one or the other, or easily watch one and then the second one later without having to scroll through this video. So you'll see part 1 and part 2. All right, let's get into it. So first we just thought about, had anybody in the room who attended the meeting yesterday, does anybody have a plan to improve their health this year? And this could be anything. This could be getting better sleep. This could be exercise. It could be nutrition. Maybe trying something like mindfulness or meditation. There are so many potential options. And so you can think about what is something you've been interested in trying and what plan you can make to start to implement that. The other thing that's really important to consider is if you have any specific barriers to making that change. You might have a goal of exercising more, but let's say you don't belong to a gym, you don't have access at home, and maybe the closest gym is a distance or something like that. So thinking about those barriers and what can you do to break down those barriers. Where would be a better place for you to work out? Would you like to have the convenience of having it at home? Would you like to go out, get out into the community, maybe meet friends, get together? So, think about what are those barriers, and if there's anything you can do to break those down, or if you need some assistance, you want to get in touch with your physical therapist and see if they have any ideas or could help. Then we had a quick discussion about priorities. And 2 main things here you'll see on the left, time, and on the right, money. So all of us have a limited amount of time, and most of us have limits in money. And the reason I brought this up right at the beginning is the things that we're going to talk about in terms of brain health are things that take time and take money. Not a huge amount of money, but a little financial investment up front to either use an activity monitor or to do brain training online. And I just wanted everyone to have the beginning of the year also allow them to reset their priorities. So yes, there are limitations on time and money, but all of us can decide what our priorities are and make sure to fit those in time-wise and make sure that that's what we spend some of our money on if it's something that is really important to us. So it's easy for us to kind of say, oh, I don't have time to do that, or I don't have the money for that. But if you slow down for a second and really think about it, how often do you go out for a Starbucks or coffee? Or how often do you go out to eat? And if you made a slight change on a monthly basis, you would be able to afford a Fitbit and Brain HQ. And time-wise, if you're working, I agree that it is hard to fit everything in. I personally am trying to fit everything in while working, and it is a challenge, but it can be done. And if you're not working, you definitely should have some time every day that you can manage to fit in some activity, exercise, and some brain training. So please just take a moment to think about your priorities, what's important, and then think about how you can really schedule and make sure to get these things in that are important for you, and you will feel the difference. You will feel better when you put those important things first. So the 2 suggestions from my standpoint in terms of looking at brain health. Of course, exercise is very important. We have talked about this in our group before. And kind of continuing on that theme, one of the things that I think is really cool to use to help you monitor your activity and exercise is an actual activity monitor. So you can use a regular pedometer, but there are so many cool, more advanced, kind of high-tech options now that I would really suggest using. And then the second one is brain training that actually works, that has a lot of research to support its use. So those are the two things that we'll be talking about today. Here we see a lot of different research studies, and like I said, in our group we have talked about exercise in the past and the research that really is supporting how important exercise is for people with Parkinson's, how it can help symptoms in the short term, likely have a strong effect over the long term. And you'll see here some different titles about how important exercise is for the brain and cognition. That's something that's important for a lot of people. Aerobic exercise training increasing brain volume in aging humans, capturing ambulatory activity decline in Parkinson's disease. This is an area that's being looked at a lot to see what happens with people with Parkinson's. Do they have similar activity levels, and what happens over time? And so far it's been identified that people with Parkinson's tend to be about a third less active than people who don't have Parkinson's, and this seems to get worse over time. And it's true, there are a lot of barriers for people with Parkinson's to stay active. It may be that just doing your daily activities takes a long time or wears you out. It might be that you have pain or discomfort or difficulty with your balance. So these are all things. If those are some of the barriers for you being active, it is extremely important for you to get in and see a physical therapist so you can help decrease that pain or improve your balance or figure out what would be the best activity for you to do. But if you don't have those types of barriers and you just haven't been doing it yet, then using an activity monitor to kind of track what you've been doing and set some goals might be really helpful. And I truly believe that just staying active over time, trying to be as active as possible, can really have a huge impact on how your disease progresses over time. This next study here with the green, does vigorous exercise have a neuroprotective effect in Parkinson's disease? This is a question that there is not necessarily a simple answer. To really show in research that exercise has a neuroprotective effect, there would need to be a really big study and follow people over a long period of time, which would be expensive to do. So unfortunately, that study might not happen or might not happen for a while. But in the meantime, there's more and more evidence that is piling up that really suggests that vigorous exercise has a neuroprotective effect and may actually have an effect on Parkinson's as it progresses. And so, I mean, in my mind, there is no question about whether or not we should all be doing it, really. Not just if you have Parkinson's, every single one of us should be doing it because it also has positive benefits to every aspect of our health. But in Parkinson's, it's pretty much a must, in my opinion. And I see the benefits on a daily basis, and that helps keep me motivated to keep pushing people if they need that extra push to help them get more active. And then down here, a study looking about how exercise builds brain health, key roles of growth factor cascades, and inflammation. So exercise has been shown to improve growth factors and decrease inflammation. So this is also exciting information, and again, can have a huge impact on Parkinson's as well as other aspects of your health. So next we looked at some activity monitors, and there are many, many different brands offering activity monitors now, and anything, whichever one you prefer or you like the look of it, you like how it works, anything is fine. I focus mostly on Fitbit because that is what I have and what I use, and I have found it to be pretty simple to use. They have a lot of options. I like the information that the activity monitors collect and how they collect it and what it looks like, and a number of my clients use them and have been able to use them with success. So I do not work for Fitbit. I do not receive any type of commission for them. It's just the activity monitor that I use myself. So I started with the Fitbit 1. You can see it's the second one from the left. It's a little clip that you can clip on your pants or put in your pocket. This is the one that I would recommend for most people starting out. It seems to be the most accurate because you're wearing it on your body. As you're moving, it collects that data. For the ones that you wear on your wrist, if you have Parkinson's and you have decreased arm swing on that side, it may not collect all of your steps accurately. And if you are someone like me, that when you're talking, you're kind of waving your arms around in a rhythmical fashion, then you may actually get steps when you're not supposed to be getting steps. So the ones on the wrist can be a little bit inaccurate in both directions. And so I recommend the one that you're wearing on your body. So the Fitbit Zip or the Fitbit One. The Fitbit One collects a little bit more data though, collects how many flights of stairs you climb during the day, which is important for strengthening. So I prefer that one. The ones on your wrist though, if that is your preference, whatever you're going to wear and use, that's the most important. The other thing is for some people, they find some skin sensitivity with wearing something on their wrist all the time. So the Fitbit One, because it goes in your clothes, on your pants or in your pocket, there's no issue with skin sensitivity. I would say the most challenging thing about the Fitbit One is how small it is. I know people who have lost it. I know people in my household who have washed one before, and some people have washed it and it still works. When my husband washed his, it didn't work, and that was the day after he got it, so that was pretty unfortunate. But Fitbit was actually good and was exchanged one for him since he had just bought it. And you'll see, though, that there is different information collected all the way from the most basic ones, the Fitbit Zip and Fitbit One, up into the active ones that monitor your heart rate. So if you're really trying to make sure that you're doing vigorous exercise and getting your heart rate up, then using one of the models that measures heart rate would be very helpful. And then the final one, the Fitbit Surge, has GPS in it. So if you like to hike or ride bikes, or run, it's really nice to use the Fitbit Surge because it keeps track of your mileage, your distance, your pace. It also measures your heart rate. So that one I use for running. So I actually have two Fitbits. I have the Fitbit One and the Fitbit Surge, and I like using both of them. So any other questions, you can let me know. That's what my thoughts are on the different options that they have. Okay, so why should you use an activity monitor? In general, Americans tend to be sedentary, and you can look up charts that kind of talk about different activity levels, but pretty much 5,000 steps or less is considered sedentary activity, and that's where most Americans tend to be. Our lifestyles have really changed a lot over the past few decades, and we are more likely to be spending time in our car, sitting in front of a computer, or watching TV for our leisure time activity. So over time, people have just been less and less active. And that's just kind of happened naturally, but unfortunately, it is not good for us. We really need to move more. Secondly, we are not good at measuring our own activity patterns. So if you ask someone, how active do they think they are, we pretty much tend to overestimate our activity. And that's potentially because we feel busy or stressed. Or we just may not be good at measuring it. But most people overestimate their own activity, just like they kind of overestimate how much they actually exercise. Whereas if you actually track it, you'll find that, unfortunately, we probably exercise and are a little bit less active than we think we are. Next, how active you are really will have an effect on your Parkinson's symptoms in the short term, which is on a daily basis. Moving and being more active will help you feel better, sleep better at night. It improves digestion. And also how active you are will really help in the long term as well. Like I said earlier, there really seems to be evidence to suggest that exercise can be neuroprotective, and activity is really important over the long term as well. With activity and exercise, consistency is key. So this also really helps to have an activity monitor because you might be kind of in this back and forth where one day you're really busy, so the next day you're tired and you kind of lounge around, and then you have another busy day and then you lounge around. And this inconsistency can actually be something that can really relate to your symptoms. A lot of people tell me they have good days and bad days. And when I probe further, usually the days that they feel better are the days that they're more active, even if they get more tired at the end of the day. Being tired at the end of the day is a good thing. You're more likely to sleep better if you wear yourself out during the day. But you may notice that then those days that you're not as active are the days that you don't feel as well. If you're not measuring your activity, you may not realize that there is this connection to feeling better when you're more active, feeling worse when you're less active, or vice versa. It's possible that it is the other way around. But so far I haven't found that yet with anybody that I've worked with. So with the activity monitor, you can help start to measure your consistency and maybe put together whether the days that you're more active, you feel better that day, or you feel better that day and the next day. And then that would help motivate you to keep up that activity level and try to increase your number of steps each day. An activity monitor can give us external monitoring, feedback, and motivation. So it really gives us more objective information about how active we are, feedback on a daily basis that can help motivate us to do more exercise. Whatever your goal is in terms of number of steps, having some objective outside information can help push you to do a little bit more and reach those goals. So how to use an activity monitor. So step one, you would get it and just measure your current kind of natural amount of steps. So I recommend for people to get the activity monitor and just wear it for a week. Don't make any changes or try to do more that initial week. It's good information just to see what you tend to naturally do and see how active you tend to be. So let's say, for example, you wear it for a week and your average is about 4,000 steps per day. So then step two would be to set a reasonable goal to increase your activity each day. So multiple studies have shown that an increase in 2,000 steps or about 20 minutes of walking can have a positive impact. And so that's usually what I use for people to set for their goal. So that would be, for example, 6,000 steps per day. The idea is that you want to set a reasonable goal that doesn't overwhelm you, that you actually can attain, and then over time we would keep trying to bump up that goal until we got to somewhere around 10,000. 10,000 isn't really a magic number. It doesn't have to be that number. It is a nice round number, but there have been studies to show improvements with people taking 8,000 steps per day. You also could take more than 10,000. You could take 12,000 steps per day. 10,000 steps per day is about 5 miles, and depending on the speed that you're walking, you can actually get 10,000 steps if you walk continuously for somewhere between an hour and a half, 2 hours. You could basically get all your steps right then. Of course, most people don't want to necessarily walk straight for an hour and a half or 2 hours, but I'm just saying that's the amount of walking and steps it takes to get to that goal by the end of the day. So if you think about that you're up and moving around for at least like 9 or 10 hours per day, it shouldn't be unreasonable to be up and on your feet and walking around for an hour and a half to 2 hours per day. And if you are, if you're much lower than that, if you're at 2,000 or 3,000 steps per day, that really means you're up on your feet and moving around very little throughout the day. And that is a big concern. And you likely are starting to feel stiff, and maybe your balance has gotten worse, or maybe, you have pain, because our bodies were made to move. And so the less and less you move, the worse you feel. Step three, keep progressing the goal over time. So we'll keep bumping up with that goal of getting somewhere probably between like 8,000 and 12,000 steps per day. Step four is to tell people about it. So on the Fitbit app, it's pretty cool. You can be friends with people, with family or other friends. It can be people who are close or people who are further away. Social pressure is one of the best types of pressure to keep you motivated. So just knowing that other people might see your activity actually can help a lot. And that's not a negative thing. It shouldn't be bad pressure, but it's a good pressure to motivate you to stay active. I just want to make one other point too, that even if your steps are 500 per day to start with, even if it's really low, you can use that to set a goal. So I would say we'd set a goal maybe of 1,000 steps per day. And, try that for a couple weeks, and then just slowly over time increase the goal. I have one client that I worked with, and when she first started wearing a Fitbit, she averaged 600 steps per day, and she was leaving the house. So she was leaving the house, going places, but only averaging 600 steps per day, which was pretty shocking to me. So a couple things. One, I think she was actually pretty inactive, but the second thing is the Fitbit, you do have to be walking a certain speed for it to capture your steps. So if you're walking really slowly, you actually don't get steps. So that may be true for some people, especially maybe some of your steps around the house. If you're moving pretty slow, the Fitbit won't be measuring it. That accelerometer is set to measure, a certain speed. So this is actually pretty important information. If you're up and moving around and your Fitbit is not capturing any steps, that probably means you're moving very slowly. And that also can be some external feedback and motivation to help remind you that you need to be taking big steps even inside the home and not just kind of slowly shuffling from one place to another. You want to push yourself and stand tall with good posture and take nice big steps. Because whatever we do most of the time is what our brain and body gets good at. So if you're taking these slow, cautious steps all the time, that is not the best type of steps for you to be taking. So this client that I have, though, she started at 600 steps, and now, which is, it's probably a year to a year and a half later, she is often getting over 10,000 steps per day. Not every single day, but she has a goal. She has a treadmill at home. She walks to watch movies. She exercises 4 days a week at the gym, and she very frequently gets over 10,000 steps per day. So it is totally possible. When we first saw her average, we had a goal set of 2,000 steps per day. And she tells me now that when we picked that goal of 2,000, she actually thought that that was probably impossible. And over time, with this, coaching and support and motivation, she has been able to reach that goal and really surpass it, and she is doing amazingly well. So this may all seem kind of simple, but I think for a lot of people, if they haven't used an activity monitor before, they might feel a little overwhelmed at the beginning. How do I start? What if my steps are pretty low to start with? What does that mean? And for a lot of people, if they get overwhelmed, they just wouldn't even use it. And so I want to make sure to take you through step by step so that you could feel comfortable using it and hopefully really see the benefit. Okay, next, so just kind of an overview of the information you can get from an activity monitor. So if we look at the picture on the left, you can see it's keeping track of how many days per week I've exercised, and there's a preset of 5 days per week of weekly exercise. My goal really is to do walking and kind of vigorous walking 7 days a week. So I could adjust that, but you can adjust it to whatever is your actual goal. And then it'll tell you how many days towards that goal you have achieved. Next, you'll see that it says, how did you sleep? And I'll get into more detail in a few slides. Then below the exercise is how active you are consistently throughout the day. I'll talk about that in more detail on the next slide. Here you can see heart rate, so it'll keep track of my resting heart rate as well as heart rate while you're exercising. If you have any history of cardiovascular problems, of having heart failure or having had a heart attack or having high blood pressure, this is a pretty interesting number to track, and you'll see that as you get walking more, for a lot of people, their resting heart rate does decrease to a healthier level. So that's pretty cool to see over time. Then you'll see you can keep track of your weight if you want to. Don't look too closely at that. I have a ways to go to reach my goal. Over here, then you see you can keep track of your water intake. Water is very important for many, many reasons. That's a whole nother topic that we won't get into a lot of detail on. But if water is one of the things you're working on, you can track in here as well to make sure that you're drinking enough. And while I'm looking at that, I'll take a sip of my water. All right. Then the picture in the middle, you can see basically on the top half, it's showing my my steps each day for that last week, and it has my goal. So my goal is 15,000 steps per day, so that white line goes straight across. On the days that I surpass that goal, there's a little star, and then on the days that I don't, you can see the bar is just a little bit below. So that gives you a quick snapshot, and then below that, it shows your exact number of steps every day, and again, there's a star next to it if you reached your goal. So that'll start to collect an average over time and is good information to see, and for me, that external motivation of trying to meet that goal is pretty powerful. Although you can see I don't meet it every day. So it's not, the idea with the activity monitor is not to get it and then beat yourself up if you aren't meeting your goals all the time. It's just to help you move in the right direction. So you definitely want to be kind to yourself. And some days it is not possible. Some days are too busy, or you're too tired, or you sleep in on the weekends and maybe you don't reach your goal, and that is okay. But if you notice that you're never reaching your goal, that's where you would want to, start to think about it. What's going on? Do you need to adjust your goal, or do you need to get up on your feet and start walking around? I meant to mention too that in the Fitbit app, you actually can adjust all the things that you're measuring and set what your goal is. So there's the set numbers, like for the number of steps, it's 10,000 steps, but you can adjust it. So if your goal is 3,000 steps, you can change that to 3,000 steps, and then it will keep track of your success. So it's not like if your goal is 3,000, then it would always be saying you missed the 10,000 goal. So you can make an adjustment to all of them so that it's appropriate for you. Now over on the right side, you can see it's keeping track of my steps so far that day. That's the 1,232. Right underneath that, you'll see 4 floors, and that's how many flights of stairs have been climbed. This is really important because strength is something that we tend to lose over time. I think it's after, I just went to a lecture this week, and the neurologist was talking about how we tend to lose an average of like 5 pounds of muscle each decade of our life, starting after 50 or something like that. I don't know exactly what the stats are. I'd have to go look. But stair climbing is a really good way to keep your legs strong. And that's another thing you might notice when I first got my Fitbit. I was living in an apartment on the first floor, and my job was also on the first floor, and I realized that I could easily go multiple days in a row without climbing any flights of stairs. And that was just pretty interesting. So then I started climbing the flight of stairs outside of my door up to the second floor apartment, and then I felt kind of weird doing that, so I stopped doing that. But if you live in a one-story home and you feel like your legs are getting weaker or you have difficulty climbing stairs, well, one reason it might be difficult is because you're not doing it very often. So maybe you can find a place, maybe you go do some walking at a park or at a mall, and maybe there's a place where there's a hill or a flight of stairs that you could purposefully climb to work on strengthening your legs. It measures flights of stairs, and it also measures just if you're walking uphill. So as you walk up an incline, it'll keep track depending on, it has some kind of sophisticated ways that it measures looking at barometric pressure and then combined with steps. So if you're riding an escalator up and you're not actually stepping, then you don't get credit even though you're going up. So it is pretty sophisticated in how it measures. It's not 100% perfect, but it is really helpful nonetheless. Then you'll see measures distance. The distance one I don't worry about too much. They have a preset length of steps. So when you put in your information in terms of your, age and your height, it estimates how long your step is. And then when you're taking your steps, it does the math and says the distance that you walked. So this step length may or may not be accurate. You can go in and change it to an accurate step length for you, and then you would have a more accurate mile measurement. But for the most part, I don't worry too much about that one. You don't need to get too complicated. Next, looking at calories burned. So if weight loss is something that you're trying to accomplish, that would be something that you could keep track of. And then over here on the right, you'll see it says 0 minutes. That one is tracking more vigorous activity. So if I'm walking fast or if I'm running. And that is preset at 30 minutes because the CDC and many organizations recommend about 30 minutes per day of more moderate to vigorous activity. And so that would be tracking it. So when you're wearing your Fitbit and you're kind of just walking around your house, you're at one pace. But then if you go out to go for a walk and it's more continuous walking at a faster pace, it would keep track of the number of minutes that you did that activity for. And this is another really important thing to measure. Make sure that you're putting, some effort in. As long as you get your steps per day, even if it's moving around in your house, that's good. But these more moderate to vigorous steps are really important to actually increase your heart rate, get more blood up to your brain so you can have those healthy nutrients you need for neuroplasticity. All right. Next, we talked about exercise versus activity. So on the left side, you'll see exercise. So the Fitbits that you wear will keep track when you do more vigorous activity and tell you how many steps per day, how many of the days you've done exercise towards whatever your goal is. For the kind of fancier Fitbits, like the Fitbit Surge that I have, it will be able to tell what type of workout I'm doing. So a walk or run or aerobic workout where that was more I was doing power moves. So I'm not necessarily walking or running, but my heart rate is increasing and I'm moving consistently. So it automatically kept track of those workouts. If you use the Fitbit One, it's not going to track this type of information. it won't figure out that you are doing an aerobic workout. It will likely know if you're walking or running just based on the speed of the steps, but I'd have to look and see exactly how it uploads that information. But otherwise, it would keep track of the minutes of more vigorous activity, let you know that you had done some exercise, and then you also can go in and enter exercise. So if you go for a bike ride, or if you do yoga, or if you do a walk and it wasn't captured, you can go in and enter that information just so that you can keep track of it. And then over on the right, so exercise is important. You know, going and riding a bike, or going for a walk, or going for a run, or whatever it is you do for exercise is very important. However, there is emerging research that shows that if you exercise, like let's say for 30 minutes or an hour per day, but then you're sedentary the rest of the day, that sedentary activity actually may kind of cancel out that exercise that you did. So unfortunately, you need to exercise, and then ideally you really need to be active throughout the day to get the most benefit. So really, exercise and activity are both important for a little bit different reasons, but overall, they're both really important for your health. So on the right, you'll see, this is a newer thing that Fitbit is doing, where they keep track of hours in the day and how many of those days you got at least 250 steps. So 250 steps is really just like 3 to 4 minutes of walking, depending on the speed that you're walking. So it's basically just saying, did you get up on your feet? Did you move around? Or did you have these big periods of time where you're sedentary? So you get to set which hours it measures. So let's say you get up in the morning at 8 a.m. You could start measuring at 8, and then let's say by 6 p.m. you have dinner and then you relax. So you could set it to measure from 8 to 6. Or for me, I kind of have longer days, so I wanted to keep track of what's happening throughout the day. So you can set the times, and then it'll just give you this information each day. How many of those hours did you get at least 250 steps? So you'll see I did pretty well that day, 11 of 14 hours. Then just below that, though, you'll see that longest stationary period from 3:39 to 6:32, almost 3 hours, I was sedentary. So I believe I was probably working on my computer at that time, but that's not good. And it's something to identify that if you have long spans of time that you're sitting, you could set it up to remind you, like even if you're watching TV, that yeah, when the commercials come on, you're going to stand up and walk a couple laps in the room and then come back and sit down. Just stand up and stretch a little bit. This is something people tell me all the time, is that when they're sitting, working on the computer, or doing anything for any period of time, they get stiff and more uncomfortable. And it's true. I mean, if you're sitting, your muscles aren't moving, your joints are in a pretty fixed position, so it's not really surprising that you would feel stiff. And I think a lot of people end up sitting much longer than they realize. And there's just no reason to sit for that long. Even just standing up and walking a little bit, moving your body, you're going to feel better, and likely your brain is actually going to work better for whatever it is that you're doing. So I really recommend tracking this, and then if you find that you tend to be sedentary for long periods of time, figure out a way that you can maybe set an alarm or set up some system for yourself so that you can stay, get more active during those hours. So this is really, really good information to have. All right, and one of the last big things that I recommend using the Fitbit for is tracking sleep. Now, one thing to say is that, Fitbit has set up algorithms to use, and they are not 100% accurate. This is not at all the same as going and getting a sleep study. So if you really have difficulty with sleep, it is definitely something that you should talk to your doctor about and maybe pursue going to a sleep center and having an evaluation, because sleep is extremely important for your brain health. So if that is a significant concern for you, you definitely want to follow up on it. What the Fitbit can do is it can help you see how long you're able to sleep throughout the night, and maybe if you try some interventions, it can help you track and see if that's helpful. So what you see first is that the way it measures is you'll see it measures the time that you're asleep, and that's when you're pretty still in bed, and then it measures when you're restless and when you're actually awake and moving around. And I don't know all the details for exactly how it determines which is which. That would be a question for Fitbit. And I would say it's not that important if it's restless or awake, unless you're waking up and then you're awake for long periods of time. But then if you're awake like that, you know it. You don't need the Fitbit app to tell you. But overall, what I'd say is important to see is just kind of the combination of restless time and awake time, and how often does that happen, how long does it happen for, and if you have difficulty with sleep, then that would give you a lot of information. So again, you would just use the Fitbit first to get some baseline. And then I think the way that it can be the most helpful is if you're going to try something to improve your sleep, see if it changes with the Fitbit. So let's say you're just going to try to make some changes to your sleep hygiene. You're going to turn off screens a little bit earlier. You're going to listen to a body scan, a little bit of a meditation to help your body calm and get ready for bed. So let's say you implement 1 or 2 strategies. So make sure to do those consistently for about a week and wear your Fitbit and measure and see, are you able to get to sleep easier? Do you sleep longer? Do you have less restless time? And give yourself about a week to see how that works out. If you see really, any improvement, ideally probably about 20% improvement in either sleep time or a decrease in restlessness, then I'd say you're definitely on the right track and you want to keep doing those things that you've started doing. If you don't see any improvement at all, it still never hurts to have good, healthy behaviors, but you will probably need to add more to that. Same thing if you try a sleep medication that your doctor has prescribed or melatonin or something. A lot of people will try taking it and they'll say, it worked one night, but then it didn't work the next night, and they'll stop taking it. And the truth is you really need to give things a little bit more time to see if they're helpful. And again, we are not necessarily the best at measuring our sleep ability because when we're sleeping, we, are not awake or fully conscious for all of that. And if we're tired, we may not be really kind of self-analyzing that well. So just your own report of how well you slept is not always the most accurate information. It's good, important information to have, but having some outside objective information is helpful as well. So I would suggest, again, anything you're going to try, you want to try for more than 1 or 2 days and use that Fitbit to see, is there positive change? Sleep is also not something that will change overnight. Haha. So you really need to make these behavioral changes and any other intervention and give it some time to work. And at least if you see that, let's say from 1 week to the next, you have more nights with more sleep or less restless sleep. It may not be that every single night is perfect, but if you have more good sleep nights, then you're moving in the right direction. So there's a lot that you can use the Fitbit to help you with, and I really recommend trying that. And if you have any questions, again, send me an email or put those in the comments. Okay, lastly, the reason I think that the Fitbits can be so helpful, I mentioned this earlier, is that social pressure. So here's just a little screenshot of myself and a couple of my friends that we are connected on Fitbit. And so it shows this is my total for the last 7 days. So you can see what your total is. You can see what other people's total is. And especially when I first got the Fitbit, I had a friend of mine that we were really close all the time, so I would always check hers, and sometimes that would motivate me to go out and do a little more walking in the evening before I went to bed. So it can be a motivator, and just knowing that other people may be looking at your steps and seeing how active you are, again, that can be a strong motivator. So you can look and see steps, and then you can see that you can slide that button over, and then you can actually send messages through Fitbit. So you can give someone props for meeting their goal or having a lot of steps or beating you. You can also cheer them. I use that a lot. You can taunt people. I don't tend to taunt people, but I guess if you have some healthy competition, that might be nice to do. But it's a fun way to connect, and that's something you can do with your local family and then any friends or family that are at a distance. It's a healthy way to kind of support each other and keep some healthy competition alive. So that brings our presentation on the Fitbit to a close. That really is just an introduction. There's so many more possible questions and things to discuss, and I welcome any questions or ideas from you all. Please post comments and feel free to send me an email. Now I'd say after sitting and listening to this, go ahead and stand up, move around, stretch a little bit, and then if you're interested now, you can go to part 2 or maybe come to that a little bit later. Give your brain a little bit of a break. And I'll quickly just show some of the references I used from some of those articles earlier and for some of the stats. So thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and I wish you luck on increasing your activity for this year, 2017.